Usually, I kept my mouth shut about the little slights, the forgotten phone calls, the holidays where I felt more like furniture than family. But when I found out what they really thought of me, when I saw the messages they didn't think I'd ever see, everything changed. So I decided to give them exactly what they wanted, a life without me in it. Let me tell you how I became invisible, and how I made sure they'd never forget it. Before I begin my story, I want to thank everyone who's been listening to these tales from my heart. Drop a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. I love connecting with souls who understand that age doesn't silence wisdom, it amplifies it. And please, hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to me. Now, let me tell you what really happened when I discovered I was already dead to my own family. It started 3 months ago, on a Tuesday morning that felt like any other. I was 78 years old, living alone in the house where I'd raised 4 children, buried 1 husband, and survived more heartache than most people see in 2 lifetimes. My daughter Sarah lived 20 minutes away with her husband and 2 teenage boys. My son Michael had moved to the suburbs with his wife and their twin girls. Both had good jobs, nice houses, busy lives. And me. I had my garden, my books, and the phone calls that came less and less frequently. I should have seen the signs earlier. The way conversations got shorter. How they'd glance at their phones when I spoke. The gentle but persistent suggestions that maybe I should consider my options, code for a nursing home, though they never said it outright. But I was stubborn, you see. This house held 50 years of memories. Every creaky floorboard, every faded wallpaper pattern, every carefully tended rose bush in the backyard, they were part of me. I thought they understood that. I thought family meant something. I was wrong. The revelation came through technology, the way most truths do these days. My grandson Jake, Sarah's oldest, had been helping me with my new smartphone. Sweet boy, or so I thought. He'd set up something called a family group chat, said it would help us all stay connected. Just text us whenever you want, Grandma, he'd said, showing me how to type messages. We're all in here together. What he didn't tell me, what none of them knew, was that he'd accidentally added me to their other chat. The real one. The one where they talked about me like I wasn't a person anymore. I discovered it by accident on a Thursday evening. I'd been trying to send a photo of my blooming tulips to what I thought was our family chat, when I noticed I was in 2 different groups. One was labeled, Family Updates, the sanitized version, where they shared school events and work news. The other was called Mom Situation. Mom Situation. That's what I'd become. Not a mother, not a grandmother, not Helen who'd worked 3 jobs to put them through college. A situation to be managed. My hands trembled as I scrolled up through months of messages. Sarah, she called me 3 times yesterday about the same grocery store story. I can't do this anymore. Michael, the neighbors are complaining about her yard again. Mrs. Peterson said she's letting it go to hell. Sarah, did you smell her house last week? Something's not right. Michael, we need to talk about memory care facilities. I found 3 places that take Medicaid. Sarah, she'll fight us on it. Michael, she doesn't get a choice anymore. She's becoming a liability. Sarah, Jake said she asked him the same question 4 times during his last visit. Michael, see. It's starting. We can't wait until she burns the house down or wanders into traffic. I set the phone down and stared at the wall. A liability. That's what my son called me. But I kept reading, because sometimes you need to know exactly how deep the knife goes. Sarah, I'm tired of pretending everything's fine when she calls. She repeats herself constantly, and her stories don't make sense anymore. Michael, remember when she insisted Dad visited her last month? He's been dead for 8 years. I stopped breathing for a moment. Yes, I had said that. Because sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, I could swear I felt him beside me in bed. Sometimes I'd set 2 coffee cups out of habit, then remember. Sometimes the grief played tricks on me, made the empty house feel less empty for just a moment. That wasn't dementia. That was love refusing to let go. But they'd turned it into evidence against me. Sarah, the guilt is killing me, but I can't keep enabling this. She's not safe alone. Michael, we're not the bad guys here. We're being responsible. Sarah, I know, but try explaining that to her. She thinks we're abandoning her. Michael, because she can't accept reality anymore. I kept scrolling, my chest getting tighter with each message. Sarah, should we involve her in the decision, or just present her with options? Michael, options implies she gets a choice. This is about what's best for everyone. Sarah, translation, what's easiest for us? Michael, don't make me the villain. You're the one who said you can't handle the constant phone calls anymore. Sarah, I'm not making you anything. I'm just saying let's be honest about why we're doing this. There were dozens more messages. Complaints about my phone calls, my repeating stories, my confusion about things that weren't confusing to me at all. They'd documented every senior moment, every small forgetfulness, every sign that I was getting older, and built a case against me like prosecutors preparing for trial. But the worst part? They weren't wrong about everything. I had been calling more often, desperate for connection. I did repeat stories because they were the only conversations I had. Yes, sometimes I forgot what day it was or whether I'd taken my pills. Yes, sometimes the house felt too big and too quiet and too full of ghosts. But I wasn't losing my mind. I was losing my family. That night, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of tea that went cold while I stared at the phone. I thought about calling Sarah, confronting her about the messages. I thought about calling Michael, asking him when exactly I'd stopped being his mother and become his burden. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I made a plan. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Patricia Hendricks. I'd known Patty since she was a little girl, whose mother cleaned houses in our neighborhood. Now she had her own practice downtown, specializing in elder law. Mrs. Morrison, she said when I walked into her office. It's been too long. How are you doing? I'm dying, I said. She looked alarmed. Are you ill? No, I replied. But I'm dead to my children. And I've decided to make it official. I showed her the messages. All of them. Months of conversations where my children discussed my deteriorating mental state, my increasing neediness, my inability to accept that I was no longer capable of independent living. Patty read them in silence, her expression growing grimmer with each screen. Helen, she said finally, these messages, they are planning to have you declared incompetent. I know. They are discussing guardianship. Taking control of your finances, your medical decisions. I know. They could force you into a facility against your will. I know. I leaned forward. That's why I need to act first. What I did next took 3 weeks to arrange properly. With Patty's help, I set up an irrevocable trust, transferring ownership of my house and most of my assets to the Riverside Senior Center, a community organization that provided meals, transportation, and social activities for elderly residents who wanted to age in place with dignity. I kept enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my days, but everything else, the house my children expected to inherit, the savings they'd probably planned to use for their own retirements, the family heirlooms they'd already mentally divided between themselves, all of it went to people who understood that being old didn't mean being useless. But I wasn't done. I also had Patty draft a very specific document, a competency evaluation conducted by a geriatric psychiatrist who spent 3 hours with me, testing my memory, my reasoning skills, my ability to manage my own affairs. The results were clear. I was mentally sharp, emotionally stable, and fully capable of making my own decisions. The evaluation was dated and notarized, a legal shield against any future attempts to have me declared incompetent. Then I waited. The family intervention came on a Sunday in March. I was expecting it. Their messages had been getting more urgent, more coordinated. Sarah texted that she and Michael wanted to stop by for a visit, which was their code for a planned ambush. They arrived at 2 p.m. with printed materials and rehearsed speeches. Sarah carried a folder full of brochures for assisted living facilities. Michael had a legal pad covered with notes about safety concerns and quality of life issues. They sat on my couch, the same couch, where I'd nursed them through childhood fevers and homework tears, and told me they loved me too much to watch me decline any further. "Mom," Sarah said, her voice gentle but firm, "we've found some really nice places. Places where you'd have company, activities, professional care." "Professional monitoring," I corrected. "It's not like that," Michael interjected. "These are communities. You'd make friends, have support." "I have support," I said. "I have family." At least, I thought I did. They exchanged the look. The one they'd probably practiced. The look that said, "Here we go, she's being difficult again." "Mom, be reasonable," Sarah said. "You're not taking care of yourself properly. You forget things. You repeat stories. Last week you called me at midnight asking if I'd seen your car keys, and your car has been in the shop for 3 days. Because I was worried about not having transportation," I said. "Because being without a car makes me feel trapped. Because I was reaching out to my daughter for reassurance, and apparently that makes me incompetent." Michael sighed. "No one's saying you're incompetent. Actually," I said, "that's exactly what you're saying. In fact, it's exactly what you said to each other for months before coming here." The color drained from Sarah's face. Michael looked confused. I picked up my phone and began reading their messages aloud. Every complaint about my phone calls. Every discussion of my mental decline. Every plan they'd made without consulting me. "She doesn't get a choice anymore," I read in Michael's voice. "She's becoming a liability." Michael opened his mouth, then closed it. "I'm tired of pretending everything's fine when she calls," I continued, looking at Sarah. "Her stories don't make sense anymore." Sarah started to cry. "Mom, you weren't supposed to see those." "No," I said. "I was supposed to disappear quietly, so you could get on with your lives, without the inconvenience of caring about me." "That's not fair," Michael said. "We do care. That's why we're here. You're here because you've decided I'm too much trouble to love anymore. You're here because it's easier to warehouse me than to include me. You're here because you want me to sign papers giving you control over my life, so you can feel better about abandoning me." The room went quiet except for Sarah's soft crying. "Well," I said, "I have some papers of my own." I handed them copies of the trust documents, the competency evaluation, and the transfer of assets. I watched their faces change as they read, as they realized what I'd done. "You gave away our inheritance." Michael's voice was barely a whisper. "I gave away my property to people who might actually value what I have to offer instead of seeing me as a problem to be solved." "Mom, that's not what this is. Isn't it?" I stood up. "You spend months discussing my deteriorating mind, my inability to care for myself, my status as a liability, and then you show up here expecting me to trust you with my future. You want me to believe you have my best interests at heart, when you can't even have an honest conversation with me about your concerns? Sarah looked up from the papers. We were trying to protect you. From what? From living in my own home. From making my own choices. From being treated like an adult who's earned the right to some dignity in her final years. From yourself, Michael said quietly. Mom, you're not the same person you were 5 years ago. We see the changes even if you don't. Of course I'm not the same person, I said. I'm older. I'm lonelier. I'm grieving a husband who was my partner for 43 years and children who used to call just to hear my voice. But I'm not broken, and I'm not helpless, and I'm certainly not incompetent. I showed them the psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Martinez spent 3 hours with me last week. Memory tests, cognitive assessments, psychological evaluation. Want to know what she found? I'm sharp as a tack. Depressed, maybe. Isolated, definitely. But mentally competent and perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. Michael stared at the document. You planned this. You knew we were coming. I planned for the day my children would try to steal my autonomy instead of addressing my loneliness. I planned for the day love would be replaced by convenience. I planned for the day I'd become a problem instead of a person. Sarah wiped her eyes. We love you, Mom. That's why. No, I said. Love doesn't document someone's weaknesses to use against them later. Love doesn't make plans about someone's life without including them in the conversation. Love doesn't look for reasons to take control instead of offering support. I sat back down, suddenly exhausted. Do you want to know what I really needed? Not a nursing home. Not management. I needed my children to call me because they wanted to hear my voice, not because they felt obligated. I needed to feel useful, not warehoused. I needed to know that the stories I tell matter to someone, even if you've heard them before. The silence stretched between us. I repeat stories, I continued, because they are the only connection I have to a time when I felt important to you. When my experiences mattered. When you saw me as more than a burden. Michael's voice was hoarse. You're not a burden. Then why were you planning to take away my choices? Why were you discussing me like I was already gone? He couldn't answer. The house, Sarah said finally. All those memories, you're giving them to strangers. I'm giving them to people who understand that memories don't die when the person who made them needs help. The senior center isn't trying to manage me or fix me or move me somewhere more convenient. They're trying to help people like me stay connected to our communities, our homes, our dignity. I looked at both my children, these adults I'd raised, these people I'd loved more than my own life. You could have been part of that, I said. You could have helped me figure out how to age in place safely. You could have included me in conversations about my own future. You could have seen my phone calls as someone reaching out for connection, instead of someone becoming a nuisance. Sarah was crying again. We still can. We can fix this. Can you? I asked. Can you stop seeing me as a liability? Can you stop planning my life without me? Can you call me tomorrow, just because you want to talk to your mother? Neither of them answered. I didn't think so. They left an hour later, taking their brochures and their plans and their good intentions. The house felt quieter than usual, but it was a different kind of quiet. Not the silence of abandonment, but the peace of having spoken my truth. The next week, I got a call from Janet Morrison at the senior center. Mrs. Morrison, we can't thank you enough for your generosity. Your gift is going to help us expand our home services program, help people stay in their own homes longer. That's all I wanted, I said. For people to be able to stay home. Would you be interested in joining our board of directors? We could use someone with your experience, your perspective on what seniors really need. I smiled for the first time in months. I'd love that. 2 months later, I was busier than I'd been in years. Board meetings, program planning, home visits to seniors who were struggling with the same loneliness I'd known. I wasn't just filling my time. I was using my experience to help other people navigate the complicated landscape of aging with dignity. My children called occasionally. Awkward conversations full of careful words and unspoken apologies. Sarah sent birthday cards. Michael forwarded funny emails. They were trying, in their way, but the trust was broken. They saw me as someone who needed to be managed, and I couldn't unsee their messages about my decline, their plans for my future, their relief at finding a solution to the problem of me. But I wasn't lonely anymore. The senior center had introduced me to Margaret, an 82-year-old retired teacher who lived 6 blocks away. We took walks together, shared books, cooked meals for each other. Real friendship based on mutual respect, not obligation or guilt. I met Harold, a widower who tended the most beautiful vegetable garden I'd ever seen. He taught me about tomatoes. I taught him about roses. We weren't romantic. We were 2 people who understood that companionship doesn't require romance, just genuine interest in each other's stories. I found community with people who didn't see my age as a disease, or my need for connection as a burden. People who understood that getting older means accumulating wisdom, not just problems. 6 months after that confrontation with my children, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Jake, my grandson, Sarah's oldest boy. "Grandma," he said, and his voice sounded different. "Older. I need to tell you something." My heart clenched. "What is it, sweetie?" "I know about the messages. The family chat. I know you saw what Mom and Uncle Michael were saying about you." "Jake." "No, let me finish. I set up that chat wrong. I didn't mean for you to see it. But I'm glad you did." I was quiet, waiting. "They were wrong," he said. "About everything. You're not losing your mind. You're not a liability. You're just sad. And they made it worse by talking about you like you weren't a person anymore." Tears started flowing down my cheeks. "I miss you," he continued. "I miss our conversations. I miss hearing about Grandpa, about what you were like when you were my age. Those aren't boring stories. They are my history." "Oh, Jake. I'm sorry, I didn't say anything before. I was scared of getting in trouble, of making things worse between you and Mom. But that was wrong. You deserved someone in your corner." "You're calling me now," I said. "That's what matters. Can I come visit?" "Not because Mom thinks I should, but because I want to. I want to hear about the senior center, about your new friends. I want to see your garden. I want to know what you're doing with your life instead of just worrying about what's wrong with it." That visit happened the following week. Jake, now 17 and taller than his grandfather had been, sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and listening to me talk about the programs we were developing at the center. He told me about school, about his girlfriend, about his plans for college. "You know what's funny?" he said as he was getting ready to leave. "Everyone talks about how teenagers don't want to hang out with old people. But some of my best conversations are with Mr. Hendricks next door and Mrs. Patterson from church. They've actually lived through stuff. They have perspective. Your mother might not understand that," I said. "Mom's scared," he said. "She's scared of getting old herself, scared of being responsible for you, scared of watching you change. But being scared doesn't give her the right to treat you like you're already gone." After he left, I sat in my garden and thought about fear. My children weren't evil people. They were scared people. Scared of watching me age. Scared of the responsibility of caring for me. Scared of their own futures, as they watched mine contract. But fear had made them cruel. Fear had turned love into management, care into control, family into a problem to be solved. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. I found Sarah's number, stared at it for a long moment, then started typing. I'm not interested in being managed or fixed or saved from myself. But if you'd like to know the woman I'm becoming instead of mourning the woman I used to be, you're welcome to call me. Love, Mom. I sent the same message to Michael. Sarah called that night. Not to apologize, not to argue, just to talk. We talked for an hour about the senior center, about Margaret and Harold, about the board meetings and the programs we were planning. You sound happy, she said finally. I am happy. Not because I'm not getting older, but because I'm not doing it alone anymore. And not because people are taking care of me, but because I'm taking care of others too. I miss that, she said quietly. Miss what? Feeling useful. Feeling like I matter beyond just managing everyone else's problems. You do matter, I said. But not as my manager. As my daughter. We're still rebuilding. Slowly, carefully, with a lot of mistakes and misunderstandings along the way. Michael is harder, he still wants to fix things, to find solutions, to make plans. But is trying to include me in the conversations now instead of just presenting me with conclusions. The house still holds 50 years of memories, but now it holds new ones too. Margaret and I have book club meetings in my living room. Harold brings me vegetables from his garden, and I send him home with flowers for his kitchen table. The senior center board meets here once a month, 8 people around my dining room table, planning ways to help our community age with dignity. I'm not the same person I was a year ago. I'm stronger. More connected. Less afraid of being alone, because I'm not alone anymore. I found family in places I didn't expect, with people who see my age as an asset rather than a liability. My children inherited what they always had, my love. But my trust, my resources, my legacy, those went to people who earned them by treating me like I still had something to offer the world. Because I do. We all do. Getting older doesn't mean getting smaller, or quieter, or more convenient for everyone else. Sometimes it means getting braver, more honest, more willing to speak truths that younger people are still too scared to voice. Sometimes it means teaching your children that love isn't about managing people. It's about witnessing them, listening to them, making space for who they are becoming instead of mourning who they used to be. And sometimes, when they refuse to learn, it means finding new people to love. People who understand that age is not a disease to be cured, but a gift to be honored. I'm 79 now. I have stories to tell, wisdom to share, and time left to make a difference. I have a community that values what I bring to the table instead of seeing me as someone who takes up too much space at it. And I have a voice that's finally found its strength, not in spite of my age, but because of it. Let them scroll through their careful messages, their plans, their solutions. Let them wonder what they missed, what they lost, what they could have had if they'd chosen love over management, connection over control. I'm too busy living to worry about their regrets anymore.